Glass is one of those things that looks simple until you actually try to draw it. Because the strange thing about glass is that the most of it is almost invisible. So today I'm going to try to make this glass look real using only graphite pencils. I'm not using color, white paint or any special material. Just an HB pencil, a 2B, a 4B, a kneaded eraser, and a blending tool. The goal is not to draw every single detail perfectly. The goal is to understand what actually makes glass readable on paper. At first, it feels like I should draw the glass itself, but if I look carefully, the glass is not really visible everywhere. What I can actually see are the edges, the reflections, the shadows, the waterline, and the small distortions inside the glass. So instead of thinking, I'm drawing a glass, I'm going to think, I'm drawing the things that make the glass visible. Before I start drawing, I want to break the reference into a few simple parts. First, there is the outline shape of the glass. Then, there is the ellipse at the top. There is another curve near the bottom. There is the waterline inside the glass. And then there are small dark shapes and bright highlights that make the glass feel transparent. This is important because if I only draw the outline, it will look like the flat icon. But if I draw the value changes, the glass can start to feel real. I'm starting with a very light sketch. I don't want to press hard here, because glass needs clean highlights later. If the first lines are too dark, they can become hard to erase, and the drawing will already feel heavy. So I'm only looking for the basic proportions. The width of the glass, the height, the angle of the sides, and the position of the top ellipse. At this stage, I'm not trying to make it beautiful. I'm just trying to place everything correctly. The ellipses are probably the easiest place to ruin the drawing. If the top curve is too sharp, too flat, or uneven, the glass immediately starts to look wrong. So I'm trying to keep the top ellipse soft and balanced. I'm also paying attention to the lower curves, because the bottom of the glass is not just one simple line. It has thickness, reflection, and a little bit of distortion. I still keep everything light because these lines are only a guide. Now I'm looking for the darkest visible parts. This is where the glass starts to appear. Not because I'm outlining everything, but because I'm choosing where the contrast actually is. Some edges are dark, some edges almost disappear, some parts of the glass are only visible because they are next to a highlight. So I don't want to make every line the same strength. If every edge is equally dark, the glass will look like plastic or a cartoon outline. Inside the glass, the shapes are not clean and straight. The water and curved surface bend what I see behind it. That distortion is one of the things that makes the drawing feel like glass. So I'm not copying this like a simple object. I'm looking for broken shapes, bent lines, and small dark places that don't look perfect. These little irregular shapes are important. They tell the viewer that the surface is transparent and curved. The waterline is another important part. I don't want it to become a thick black stripe. It should be visible but still feel like it is inside the glass. So I'm using a controlled line, then adding a little tone around it. The water also changes the values inside the glass. Some areas become slightly darker. Some highlights become sharper. And some shapes behind the glass become less clear. Now I'm moving to the cast shadow. This is easy to underestimate, but the shadow is one of the main reasons the glass sits on the table instead of floating. The darkest part is usually close to the base, where the glass touches the surface. Then the shadow becomes softer as it moves away. I'm building it slowly because if I make the shadow too dark too early, it can overpower the glass. The shadow needs to support the drawing, not steal all the attention. Now I'm using a blending tool very carefully. I don't want to blend everything. If I smooth the whole drawing, the glass will lose its sharp highlights and clean edges. So I'm only softening the areas that need a gentle transition. The cast shadow can be softer. Some reflections can be softer. But the strongest highlights and the sharpest edges needs to stay clean. The highlights are the part that makes this feel like glass. Some of them were left white from the beginning. Some of them I can bring back with the Kneaded eraser. But I have to be careful. If every highlight is too bright and too sharp, the drawing can look messy. So I'm choosing only the most important highlights. The bright edge of the side, the small reflections near the top, and a few clean marks near the waterline. These white areas are just as important as the dark areas. At this point the drawing is start to work, but it still needs stronger contrast. So I'm going back with the darker pencil and choosing the deepest darks. I don't want to darken everything. I only want to push the areas that help the glass read more clearly. The base needs more weight. Some reflected shapes inside the glass need more depth. And the contact shadow needs to be stronger so the glass feels connected to the surface. This is where the drawing starts to feel less like a sketch and more like a finished object. If you want to practice drawing glass, don't start by thinking about every tiny detail. Start with the big shape. Then look for the strongest darks. Save the brightest highlights. Pay attention to the shadow. And remember that some edges should disappear. That is what makes transparent objects feel more realistic. Now I'm cleaning the drawing. This step is not very dramatic, but it makes a big difference. I'm softening areas that become too heavy. I'm lifting small highlights. I'm cleaning the outside edges. And I'm checking if the glass still feels transparent. Because with glass, it's very easy to overdraw. Sometimes the best correction is not adding more pencil. Sometimes it is removing graphite and letting the paper show through. So here is the final drawing. It is not perfect, but it does what I wanted to do. It reads as glass, even without color. And the biggest lesson from this drawing is that glass is not about drawing a perfect outline. It is about edges, reflections, shadows, distortion, and clean highlights. Once those parts start working together, the viewer understands what the object is. I want to keep testing different materials and textures with simple pencils, so if you want, comment what I should try next. Metal, water drops, crumpled paper, fabric, or something completely different. And if you enjoyed this drawing, subscribe for more pencil drawing experiments and realistic graphite art. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.